That brings us to item E on the consent calendar to adopt ordinance 599 zoning text amendment RZ 215. Second reading to amend Brisbane Municipal Code Chapter 17.20 M1 Manufacturing District to expand the permitted and conditionally permitted uses and make related amendments to Chapter 17.02. And I pulled this from consent because I have some concerns about the text amendment. We were going against the recommendation of the Planning Commission to make certain uses the conditional uses and not permitted uses. And last Tuesday night, I was in attendance at the BBCAG meeting, and I thought that it was very interesting. We had a report from the Regional Water Control Board, Alex Karpowitz. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly.
It is.
And she gave us a little bit more information about the contaminants that are at one of the sites, which is the former VWR sites, that would be affected by this amendment. And basically there's two levels of contamination in the different areas of the site. One, they assume that is coming from the old fill that covered part of the site from the 1906 earthquake, and the resulting fill from that has arsenics and leads, mostly heavy metals type hazards. And then there's also other hazards that are probably from the prior use of chemical storage tanks. And the thing that makes me want to pull this and discuss it is that the prospective owners and the current owners have been working in a partnership to develop a cleanup strategy. And that was just put on the website on Thursday. Thursday, today. And it's not it won't be available until today to even be looked at. So it seems that they are also still doing and waiting for permission to do more test wells and drill it in to see what the contaminants are getting closer to the lagoon. So the fact that we don't have the information on the properties yet makes me feel that we're moving ahead with changing the zoning so that a different use can be used when we're not even sure what the remedial action will be needed to clean it up, and that we're doing it before we really have the information that they are still investigating what the possible uses and what the possible cleanups would be for the sites. So I think we should at least wait until not only the information for the one parcel that they sort of have an idea what the contaminants are, but until we have in about 33 months, 2 to 3 months, they figure they'll have information from the test wells to see what kind of contamination may be going into the lagoon. And I think before we add somewhat sensitive areas of zoning to that property, that we should know what those issues are. So that's why I think we should wait until that information is available to make the zoning changes.
I was going to suggest that, if I may, that we asked the planning director to sort of review where the Regional Water Quality Board is at on this issue, and we did get a letter last time stating where they're at. And and then there's asked the attorney to weigh in on this too, because there's some question as to what our authority is and what is the appropriate way to go in light of this issue. So I would appreciate some staff analysis.
As the mayor indicated, I guess the draft wrap for the Parcel A, the site's divided into two parcels, Parcel A and Parcel B. Parcel B is the area that's considered more contaminated at the south end of the site, and that's where they're involved in more investigatory work happening currently and in the future once they get the access to and that tied into the off-site agreement or access agreement they're trying to get through UPC to access the site for testing. In terms of Parcel A, again, just kind of skim through the wrap today, the preliminary, the draft wrap, and they're talking about excavating some material from inside what was a chemical room in the northerly building, and then doing some in situ remediation via injection. And again, as a follow-up, although I didn't attend Tuesday night's meeting, I was aware it happened, and we have been in contact with the regional board staff, again, asking if there was any new information that had come to light from the last time we had this discussion at the council that changed their position about whether or not commercial and industrial uses would be restricted in some manner, and their answer was there's nothing has changed since the last time we reported back in terms of the regional board's position on land use on the site.
Can I make my impression of the report that I attended, and Councilmember Lentz also attended that meeting, and they were saying that there is no restrictions on the land unless they touch the land. So if they change the building, if they dig down to change the building, to make a change, that will trigger reasons that they have to do more cleanup than they do the way it sits right now. And the whole purpose of this ordinance is to let them change the use and the footprint of the building. They're going to have to remodel it to change the use. And to change the use is going to trigger a cleanup. But we don't know what that cleanup is. So why would we be changing the use before we know what the cleanup would be to make those changes in the use? I think we're just the cart before the horse. And we're also, this is not looking at all the properties that are affected by this ordinance. It's only looking at one specific property that is affected by the ordinance. And we didn't do the traffic or the impacts or anything on the rest of the areas that are affected by it. So again, I think we're looking at it much too narrowly, and we're looking at it before we have the information it's been submitted to the Water Resources Board. It has not been analyzed, and it has not been determined to be complete yet.
So if I may, so yes, I attended the BBCAG meeting, and the reason I went there was because, I had had a conversation with Alex, and so I wanted to be able to talk with her in person at the meeting and get her take, because she was going to be giving the presentation to the BBCAG. And so it was a very informative meeting, learning about the soil content underneath the most contaminated site, having the 1906 earthquake soil, and that was part of the main reason that the site's contaminated. And that, but that the foundation that's over this site is providing the barrier that's keeping the emissions at bay. So I've talked to her. I asked her, well, are there any levels of emission that would be significant to the detriment of the health of people working at the site? And she says no. So they've run multiple tests, at both buildings. So now the contamination that potentially is leaching underneath into the lagoon, we don't know about that because UPC at the time had not given authorization to do the testing, but now they have, and so that will go through. However, if there's contamination that's leaching into the lagoon, that really has nothing to do with the use of the site. So the reason why the Regional Water Quality Control Board is dealing with this issue right now is because of Prologis doing their due diligence because they want to buy the property. And so having that pressure on BWR and Univar, I think there's two entities there, that forced their hand. And now that this has been brought to the Water Board's attention, they will have to clean the site. There isn't, that site will just have to be remediated. And they'll do the RAP, and that RAP will designate what will need to be done. And we don't know what that RAP will produce. But as far as being able to do these uses at the site right now, that, and based upon Alex's determination, are fine. I mean, this whole thing, moving this forward, will eventually help us get the site to where we want it to be. And we want to stop any contamination that is still going in or potentially going into the lagoon. We don't know if it is or not, but that RAP will, tell us what's going on and provide the criteria for which to mitigate. So I hear what you're saying, Madam Mayor, but I feel we need to move forward. The council has already given their decision, and so I don't see it. I don't agree with you. I understand where you're coming from, but I think we need to move forward with this.
I'm going to make one comment, and then I'll open it up for anybody else who'd like to and the public. Again, Ms. Karpowitz said that the way the building sits now does not have harmful enough off-gassing to be a detriment to people occupying and using the building. That's agreed. She did say that, although she doesn't have the formal documents on how to clean it up. They did say that they were going to most likely leave any heavy metals in place because they're better off undisturbed than disturbing them. But if any changes to the building are made, where they have to put in a new sewer line or put in a foundation or put in any kind of change to that building, that is going to trigger toxins to be disturbed and would need to be looked at how to mitigate them. But they don't have the plan got put on the website today. We didn't have that information when we made that decision to go ahead with the change of uses. And again, there's no way to change building A to a food preparation without updating the building. So they're going to need to update the building. And to update the building, they're going to have to disturb the soil. And so, again, until we know what those toxins are, and we're only looking at half the site, and we're going to zone for the whole site.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe you have insight to Prologis and what they want to do with their property that I am not aware of. But
Well, they want to change a use.
Yeah, but that is, again, that has not been presented to us. That they want to do this and they want to have these plans happen to their site. So as far as what they've said that they're going to do is keep the building in its configuration right now until the site is clean, because if they do any major changes to the site, then apparently they're responsible. And why would they take that risk on themselves? They want VWR to clean the site, and because they're putting that leverage on VWR to do it, it makes common sense. I mean, if you're buying a piece of property and someone has done something that is their responsibility, why would you want to keep that liability? You want to put the pressure on them to clean it up, and to clean it up right, so that then you can then use your property to the best of the potential of the market.
I personally just don't think that we should be doing this before we know what it is. We don't have the toxicology reports. We don't have the remedial action plan for even half of the site. It hasn't been made available. It hasn't been approved. And I think it's just being...
if there was a health risk to use the building as it is right now, then we wouldn't move forward. But there isn't a risk to use the building as is right now.
Right, but we want to add additional uses that would put people at risk. Okay. Well, we can beg to differ on this. Lori, would you like to weigh in on this?
Respectfully, Madam Mayor, I agree with Cliff on this. The email that we got from Alex Carpwith clearly states that the buildings are fine for commercial or industrial use, and that if contamination was found, that it would be the water board's jurisdiction to put in restrictions on how it can be used. So as our city attorney, I believe, told us at the last meeting, it's not within our jurisdiction to make a decision on this application based on the toxic. So it's really, I mean, as much as we would like to know more information, it really shouldn't have anything to do with the decision that we're making, because it's not in our jurisdiction. And we've been advised that if we do make a decision based on that ground, it's subjecting the city to potential liability for decreasing the value of the property. So, I would hate to head in that direction. I think we need to be mindful of what our role is and what the water board's role is. And if, like I said, there is any, if the remedial action plan calls for a certain level of cleanup and finds certain contaminants, then any restrictions would be placed by the water board, is my understanding, and that would be on top of whatever uses are allowed. So I stand by what our decision was.
It is our decision to change land use or to grant land use.
But that's right. But we've been advised that we shouldn't make it based on any analysis of the toxics.
And also, Ms. Karpowitz said that because this is a voluntary plan, they have come forward. They're not under orders, so they would not put any restrictions on the use of the land because it's a voluntary cleanup. So,
but it initiated as a voluntary cleanup, but VWR is now responsible for cleaning that site. That's what Ms. Kerpowitz had said.
If there's any change to the use, any change to the buildings, they don't go out looking for toxins.
No, the site needs to be cleaned, and it's in her jurisdiction now, and the board is responsible for making sure that site is cleaned now. Absolutely.
Oh, that is not what I heard, but okay.
John?
It's my understanding if the RAP will have to be implemented. It's not a discretionary action on the part of the applicant. That's my understanding is once it's under the board's jurisdiction, irrespective of how it got there. Once there's a wrap, there will be a procedure in place implemented by the regional board to ensure that it's implemented.
And that's only for the cleaner site, and that's for the contaminants that are intended, and I haven't seen the wrap because it was only published today or put on the website today. That's only if they change the building that they would move those contaminants. But we're getting into semantics that are probably beyond us.
Changing the building. What do you mean by changing the building?
If you dig below the asphalt, if you touch below the asphalt, you're disturbing the toxins, and then they would have to deal with something. But to change a use from the current warehouse type use or office use, one would assume you're going to need to make changes to the building.
I'm not.
I think we're, in staff's mind, there are two issues here. One is the list of range of permitted uses, and that's what's before you as part of this rezoning request. The other is a question of whether or not they would have to remodel a building for whether it to accommodate a use that's already permitted under the current zoning or, the modified list of uses. There are no applications before the city to modify the building. So to say that they are going to do that or not going to do that, I don't have any application that indicates they're going to modify the building to accommodate either any use, whether it's already on the permitted list or whether it's the modified list. So there are two questions. One is the uses and the list which could be potentially allowed on the site. And then the separate question of what they might need to do to the building or buildings over time and how that might impact their further remediation issues is not, I don't have any, there's no information submitted to the city that indicates they're changing the building. And if they do change the building, that triggers potential exposure to metals, and yes, then I would expect they'd have to remediate that to the regional board's satisfaction. If they have to build, excavate for utility lines, again, whether that's for a permitted use today or a permitted use based on the revised zoning, they would still be subject to the same regional board requirements of if they disturb materials to physically alter the site. You don't have an application in front of you to physically alter the site.
Okay.
So, John, if I may, Madam Mayor, if I may,
Of course.
We're talking, you called earlier Parcel A and Parcel B. And Parcel B is more contaminated. That's on the southerly part. And Parcel A, is that the 200,000
Yes.
square foot building?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's where the chemical room was?
Correct.
More like VOCs, acids, or?
VOCs, I believe, is they characterize it as from an industrial waste line that probably was cracked or leaking from a waste line.
Uh-huh. So that's in the soil? And so there would have to be some internal excavation, is what you're saying?
Correct.
And I know that they generally remove the dirt and they take it and literally let it evaporate in the air, right? Or something like that. From as I recall,
These are petroleums.
This particular, at least what was proposed, whether the board approves it or not, was to ship it off, to haul out, excavate it and haul off, not aerate it. And then they would do clean fill and then do some injections at the boundary of where the excavation was completed. Again, this is all just out of the draft wrap.
and this is considered the lesser contaminated site, right? So it would be probably remediated quicker, is what they're saying. Is that?
Well, in terms of the investigations, are much further along, and again, I guess until they complete the investigations on Parcel B and understand the full scope and extent, it's hard to say, but they're much further along with this.
Parcel A.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
And John, you talked about, the work that would be done based upon whatever construction to the, changing the building. And that would be whether it was a permitted use or a conditional use. If something that they do construction-wise triggers certain requirements that the board recommends, they're going to have to do it. So it doesn't matter if it's conditional or permitted.
That's correct.
Yeah.
I just want to complicate things even further, if I may, Madam Mayor. I wanted to point out that later on in the agenda, there's another item, the point of which is to bring the zoning ordinance up to date with the 1994 general plan. And the way it is now, we have these M1s on these, at least 3 different sites. And the general plan talks about at least 2 of them being TC, trade commercial. And what we're proposing to do with this next agenda item, or maybe the one after the next
One after.
is to send it back to the Planning Commission and say, okay, we'd like to bring some conformance between the general plan and the zoning ordinance. But we also want you to look to see whether or not it should cover all 3 of them, or maybe just this one, and maybe look at the industrial way in a different way, maybe look at the Northwest Bayshore in a different way. So further on in the meeting, if we agree to do this, we would be asking the Planning Commission to look to see whether it should be the same zone, or the zone should be different. And if it's different, then it's going to have different criteria and permitted and/or conditional uses, and et cetera, et cetera. So that it's really a 2-part strategy we're looking at here. So the question of what happens to the other properties is really a different one, and we haven't really investigated that. That's the point of sending it back to the Planning Commission. Did I get that right?
So I do have one slip from the public who'd like to speak on this, and if we can, I'd like to hear from them, and then we can continue the discussion. So, Dana Dilworth.
Thank you, Dana Dilworth, resident of Brisbane. I guess I'm founding member of the BB I kind of wish all of you had stayed in the CAG and listened over time, because when Alex was giving the presentation for Kinder Morgan in the prior round, and knowing that the ground is saturated with gasoline, knowing that people are receiving it coming up through through the ground, we were saying, aren't you going to require any kind of mitigation? Which they didn't. Their response was, it's a tank farm, it's an industrial use, tank farms expect there to be gas there, we're not doing anything about it. So all the workers at the tank farm are exposed to volatile organic compounds coming up through the earth. Yes, there is a asphalt barrier, but it's not 100%, and it's kind of a jerry-rigged kind of response, rather than doing what the contemporary fashion is laying down the plastic and doing the VOC vapor barrier and things like that. One of the things they said was, especially on the chemical place, was that the sewer pipes were glass because it was acids or one assumes acids and volatile chemicals. I know was recently told that the school that I work at has a pit to contain acid and neutralize it with baking soda, as it were. if there's a spill within the school system of doing experimentation. So I know there are ways that when you know you're going to have that release, that you handle it in advance, but this is post exposure. Anyway, I'm going to kind of reiterate on things that people have said, that this process seems backwards, that I believe that you should correct the inconsistencies with your zoning map and general plan and the language first, that you need to review the environmental impacts with an initial study on what this change would do. I've already objected to the rezoning for the reasons of lack of environmental review, and want to remind you that the whole purpose of CEQA is for decision makers to understand and evaluate the environmental consequences of their discretionary decisions before making them. Here you've got all the questions about environmental impacts as though somebody else is going to remedy it. And you need to know this before you make this decision. Because if you don't, you lose the opportunity to mitigate anything in the future. You right now have the opportunity to set limits that could conserve resources, limits that could speak to sustainability. Right now you have that opportunity. If you pass this tonight, you won't have that opportunity because it'll be permitted, and it'll be somebody on staff go, oh yeah, permitted, check that box off. I think this is contrary to our general plan, which sought to eliminate industrial designations, and now you're adding one that has additional impacts in terms of intensive resource use. Without looking at those impacts, you won't be able to have any conditions. And the one condition that's done is about smell. There are a lot of other issues about food processing than just smell. And one is of soda companies coming in, and that's why, this is to kind of grandfather in the brewery that was allowed, that really wasn't allowed before, but it got allowed. The horror stories of Coca-Cola coming in and depleting water supplies, or it could be Nestle, it could be anybody. It doesn't have to be Coca-Cola. And pray to the commerce gods for my forgiveness. But that you have also ignored the fact that in the foreseeable future there would be an increase in industrial areas proposed, as are currently proposed in the Baylands specific plan. Now, the draft EIR didn't look at that. I know we've been through this from one end to the other and back. So I know the draft EIR for the Baylands didn't look at these new uses that you're proposing. And so it should have an environmental review somewhere, either through the owners of the land that are getting this new opportunity, or right now. So without looking at the impacts, you'll have no standing to mitigate. You'll not have any opportunity to consider of alternatives to energy use. You won't have any opportunities to consider the impacts to the resources of water and energy because it's a permitted use. I kind of agree, or I agree with council members that are thinking that this is premature before you know what it is, that this new use, what impact it will have. And as I had said earlier, if anything, they should all be conditional so that it comes before the Planning Commission so that we understand the depth and the impacts as a community. to this proposed land use change. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of Tom?
Good evening. Tom Hines, longtime resident. Of course there's no application to make changes. They don't even own the building yet. Duh. Of course there's no application. Don't be swayed by what things staff say. You know, I'm really disgusted, folks. Really disgusted. We are on somebody else's timeline. It's not ours. I don't know whose or why, although I could make some educated guesses. But for now, I'm going to say I don't know who or why, and I'm sure the community would like to know as well. So they don't even own the property, and we want to make zoning changes? I don't get it. I don't get it. It's one reason I retired from architecture. You know, nobody tells their plumber how to fix the toilet. Nobody tells your dentist how to drill. But professional architects and planners plan. They make zoning maps. And then you get somebody with a lot of money wanting to rezone the city for their profits. I'm disgusted. What's the rush? They don't even own the property. You want to rush this through tonight? What is the rush? Whose timeline are we on? I would like an answer to that. Maybe not now, but say within a week? Why is this happening faster than we can handle it? You took 2 meetings past 12:30 because of this rush. You placed the most important item last on the agenda so that you took the meetings past 12:30 a.m. to vote on it, and the public could not participate. You claim to represent the public. You claim to be their leaders, and then you do these 12:30 a.m. passing of $200,000 to somebody to come up with a plan, to make a plan? It's deceit, folks. It's deceit. You are deceiving this town. Taking those meetings past 12:30 twice, that's 2 strikes. 3 strikes and you're out. And if you vote on this, pass this tonight, that just might well be the 3rd strike. Thank you.
Paul?
Paul Buscal, Brisbane resident. So, the last time we discussed this issue, I had asked if there was a requirement that there should have been notification to the residents that are within the 300 feet of the property, and there was no response to that. So I'm asking about that tonight, and if there was, or if there should have been a notification to the residents in the trailer park and people that live on Bayshore, then why weren't they notified? You know, there's things in this town that have been decided at a person's choice or option as opposed to their obligation. And, you know, there needs to be accountability. So my question is, should there have been notification to the residents in the trailer park and on Bayshore? And if not, how come? And to address what Mr. Hines said about the timeline for these meetings, you know, it seems like they're in violation of the Brown Act and our First Amendment right for accessibility. And if we're having major decisions made at midnight, that doesn't make it accessible for a lot of people, whether they're here at the meeting or watching it on TV. So we need to reformulate how these major decisions are being decided upon. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Can I get a response from staff on whether the zoning would require notification?
Yes, all property owners within 300 feet of all zoning districts and within all zoning districts were notified of the Planning Commission hearings and the City Council hearings.
Okay, and in that, does that include the area for the trailer park? Would fall in that range, or?
I don't have the map in front of me, but I would, yes, it would extend west of Bayshore.
And when you say property owners, would that also be tenants and rental people? So I'm assuming that the trailer park would be owned by one person and the other spaces are leased. So would that notify the individual tenants or just the property owner?
Whoever shows up on the assessor tax roll, that's what we use as our database. So property ownership.
Okay, so do we have a list of the notified properties owners then?
In the file, yes.
Thank you. You're here, I should
Madam Mayor,
let them come up. Yes,
may I ask a question of the city attorney, please?
of course.
One of the things that came up, I think Paul said that we're in violation of the Brown Act and First Amendment right, going after, can you respond to that?
It's not a violation of the Brown Act to go beyond midnight.
And how about the First Amendment right?
It's not an issue.
Okay.
It's not really a,
I said it pertaining to accessibility within the Brown Act. So was my concern, is that those type of meetings aren't accessible to this community at midnight.
I understand your point, and we'll get a better legal description when that can be addressed. I don't think is that something you want to address at this point?
I have to say it's a policy call for the board to decide how long it wants to go. It was properly noticed under the Brown Act, and there isn't a First Amendment issue. There's not a legal issue.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Diaz.
Good evening, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Joel Diaz. So, it sounds like it's really just a few months of delay, a few months, 2 to 3 months, I think the mayor said, to get the RAP in hand to evaluate it. I don't think that's a long delay. I think the developer will wait for that. It seems like they're seriously interested in the property, and it makes logical sense to have that information. There's really no need that I see to make these assumptions that everything's going to be okay. The general plan has a prescribed methodology to treat these contamination situations, and it seems like the council sort of short-circuited that process by taking this action and not having the RAP in hand, and really unnecessary. I don't see the need for it. I don't see the rush. We're only talking about 2 or 3 months. It's the holidays anyway. Nothing's really going to happen. And it's unfortunate that there's contamination on the site, but it's not your fault. It's not our fault. It's the property owner, and now it's the buyer's problem. And if it takes 2 or 3 more months, well, You know, that seems like that's what it should take. There's no reason to do them some sort of service, especially if it's not going to impact anything. I also want to respond to the assumptions that the Regional Water Control Board is going to do a good job. You know, there is no guarantee that they're going to do a good job. They're just a regulatory agency. They're fallible. They make mistakes. There are no guarantees that people still won't get hurt or worse. And all of the analysis that they do, you know, there's still the outside chance that something could be wrong, somebody could get hurt. And because of that chance, that possibility, I think you need to be more circumspect and wise about this and just try to follow the procedure that we have in writing in the general plan, which is the governing document for the entire city in terms of planning, how you plan these sites and change the use designations. You have to follow the rules. And, you know, it seems to me that that there is no guarantee that, there is no logical guarantee that somehow the seller is going to take care of this. As we know, corporations go bankrupt and defunct all the time. And there is no guarantee that they will take care of it. And we don't know the agreement between the buyer and the seller in terms of the contamination. It may be that they have some provision, and I'm sure they do, that if the contamination reaches a certain level or cost level, there's going to be some compensation to the buyer, or there's going to be some sort of offset, or there's going to be some provision for that eventuality. And we don't have that piece of the puzzle. We don't, and so it doesn't make any sense that we should try to predict or assume that things are going to logically unfold the way that we'd like them to unfold. And as we know with corporations, they typically do not unfold the way that we hope. And they do definitely, a lot of times, do not follow a moral code. And I think that you guys have an obligation to the city and the citizens and to keep people safe and to follow the rules and not to just do favors for developers. I mean, I can see that you guys want this thing to happen, and that maybe that's fine. I don't think anybody's saying no, you know, just no, not at all. They're just saying follow the rules, be safe, you know, take the safe steps, protect everybody. Don't just make assumptions and say, well, based on what I've heard by word of mouth, it's going to be okay. And based on an incomplete report a report that I just got today, it's going to be okay. And we know that that study has not considered all of the possible outcomes and the hazards that are tied to that and the health risks. And so if it wasn't unhealthy and it wasn't dangerous, it wouldn't be a big deal. But it is dangerous. It is unhealthy. And we have to be careful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, if I could ask the city attorney to respond to that point about waiting for the information in the RAP, and if you could explain, as you did in the last meeting, about the role of the city council versus the role of the water board.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Liu. The Regional Water Board will make a determination about whether there are any uses that need to be restricted during the cleanup period, and even after the cleanup period, if the Water Board determines that certain uses are not appropriate. The Water Board will put deed restrictions on the property, and those deed restrictions will trump your zoning ordinance. So what I mean by that is, if there's a use that your zoning ordinance would allow that is inconsistent with the deed restriction would trump. And so that use would not be permitted, even though it's permitted within the zone. In terms of the role of the council here is certainly to make a determination about what kind of uses the council wants to allow as a permitted use or a conditional use in this zone. And the council can exercise its discretion to do that. But in terms of the cleanup on this property, the Regional Water Board will make a determination about what cleanup is appropriate and whether certain uses need to be restricted as a result of the condition of the property. Have I answered your question?
Yes, my question more specifically was whether the information that comes out in the wrap should have any bearing in our decision.
The information that comes out in the wrap in the next couple of months will tell you what the plan is, will tell you what the cleanup plan is, and whether there are any uses that would be restricted during the proposed and the ordered cleanup. It may then, the Regional Water Board may make a determination at the end of the cleanup, as I said before, that certain uses need to be restricted either indefinitely or for some period of time after the cleanup. So that determination will be made by the Water Board. The city doesn't really have any mechanism for making that determination, but the Water Board does. And so what's before you now is whether or not to allow certain proposed uses in this zone, and if you are going to allow them, whether to allow them as a matter of right or whether to allow them as a conditional use.
Thank you.
So, not to contradict the Deputy City Attorney, but when the wording that I heard from the Water Board was that they would not, because this was a voluntary item for them to be cleaning up, that the current property owners and the presumed purchasers had come voluntarily to the Water Board, that they would not be putting deed restrictions on the property and that there would be no reason to exclude a use until it came forward with a plan, and that they wouldn't do that because it was a voluntary process.
I've never heard that, and
Okay.
I doubt if the Water Board would ever make such a,
Okay.
a deal.
I guess we heard different things. But that aside,
Yeah, I mean, with voluntary, involuntary, if VWR is the one that's on the hook for it and the current owner, the potential buyer is not on the hook for anything right at this point. They're not responsible for any of the cleanup whatsoever. Even the current owner is not responsible for it. VWR is the one that's responsible for it.
and not all of it. Some of it was before VWR.
Well, that was before the current owner even owned it. Mm-hmm. I think so. But, because of the major contamination they volunteered to clean it up. If they didn't volunteer, then they would have still had to clean it up involuntarily. Then there would have been an order, and it's a different set of mechanisms, and I'm not sure legally what they are, but I don't think it says, oh, just clean it up this much then instead of, this much. I don't think there's a difference other than that they volunteered, to clean it up, which is the right thing for them to do because they know that they put the nasties there. And so they were going to do it voluntarily or involuntarily. So I don't know what the thought mechanism was behind that. Could have been, what triggered it. I don't know. But,
Okay.
That was one of the things that I think Cliff, you and I had the conversation with the property owner back in 2011 or somewhere like that with staff that better make sure that they clean the stuff up. You better check it out and do the due diligence.
Absolutely.
On that. And so they'll let BWR off the hook on this because, they're going to leave behind, a bunch of crap. So there's...
So besides the issues of the toxins and the remedial cleanup that's going to need to be done and the remodeling of the business or any of those things, the other issue that I have, and even if those were completely off the table, and we're just talking about zoning properties and changing what our M1 district is, and changing from conditional to permitted uses. We did not study all the properties and the impacts from that zoning change. They only looked at that site. They didn't look at the industrial waste site. They didn't look at it. They didn't put in the impacts from there. We don't have sufficient data, toxins aside, to make these zoning changes. We don't have traffic studies for the other properties that are included. We're treating this one property like it's entitled to make the changes for a whole bunch of other properties, which if you make the application, you're making it for the whole area. But they only studied their portion. They didn't study the impacts from the other portion. And we're all assuming that that portion's not going to count because it's going to be handled some other way. And we don't know that's ever going to happen. But we know we're changing the zoning on it without having any impacts of what allowing data centers or food production or anything else as a permitted right, a permitted use, instead of a conditional use. So on that alone, I think we don't have the information to do a zoning change when we're going against our planning department saying that should be conditional. I think we're just, even if it weren't contaminated, we're just going before we have real information, and we're basing it on this one project that isn't even a project. So.
Well, I just would quickly reiterate that there is a second part to this consideration, and the second part is intended to address that issue.
I just want to say that's based upon the testing that has been done. The site is not a health risk to people working in those buildings.
Okay.
And it was,
even if that's not the case,
that's not true. The site has been tested numerous times, and there are no health risks for working inside those buildings based upon these uses. And when I was at the BBCAG Tuesday night, I was surprised that none of the board members asked, is this site safe to work at right now? No one asked that question. Now, of course, I had asked that question, and we had talked about it. It was in the information that was written by Alex. So why we're bringing this up, and it's based on, I don't know, I was like, we're creating this fear based on just speculation and not on science, not on the data that was done. And so why, I just don't think that it's right to be saying these things when the information from the agency is contradicts that. And eventually we will have the RAP and we'll have the mitigation steps that are needed to deal with the contamination that is there. But as a risk to the people that work there, it's not a risk, unless you feel that I guess you could have your gut feeling that it's not, and I don't know where you would base that information of why it would be a risk. But based upon the information that we have all seen, and from the information that came from the board, for these uses at these sites, it's not a risk, health risk.
Okay. And that's certainly an opinion that you can have and you can interpret that way. And even if we take the contamination at these sites completely off the table, and let's say that it's pristine land, and we're zoning this area down here and this area up here, and we never studied the traffic, we never studied any of it except for this one site. So we're just going to extrapolate that data on the traffic and the impacts of these changed permitted uses and apply it to areas that we never even looked at the data. And if that's how you think a decision should be made, then we can make that decision. I just think that we're making zoning changes for a whole area for one property, maybe 30% of this area, 20% of the area that we're rezoning,
Well, you know,
at the request of one property owner.
okay, well, you know, now you're bringing up this other subject matter, right, which was different from what you were talking about before. And as Councilmember Miller has said, we are going to be addressing that in item B under new business. So I'm just going to make a motion to approve ordinance number 599, zoning text amendment RZ-2-15 to amend city's M1 manufacturing district zoning text.
Okay.
I second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 And I would say no. Thank you. So, thank you, and that brings us to new business, item A, to consider discussion and possible adoption of interim ordinance 603 as an urgency measure pursuant to Government Code 65858, imposing a 45-day moratorium on establishing, operating, permitting, and/or licensing any new electronic cigarette retail vape shops within the city of Brisbane. Staff report, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, council members. At the October 15th council meeting, the council requested staff to come back with a moratorium on specialty retailers selling electronic cigarette products. Those shops are often referred to as vape shops. In front of you is an urgency ordinance which would impose a short-term 45-day moratorium on the establishment of vape shops in Brisbane. State law currently bans the sale of e-cigarettes to minors, and as such, vape shops are engaged in what is essentially an adult-only use. Some cities have found that these types of retailers produce an undesirable effects on surrounding commercial establishments and neighboring residential areas. Many cities have adopted regulations that specifically address vape shops. Some impose zoning requirements to limit the number or the location of such retailers. Others impose it simply as a conditional use. And there are cities that ban vape shops altogether. Brisbane does not have any vape shops currently. Your zoning ordinance as it currently reads would allow the establishment of a vape shop in any zone that permits retail uses. The government code permits a 45-day moratorium as an urgency measure. It requires findings by council to establish a current and immediate threat to public health, safety, or welfare. To adopt such an ordinance requires a 4/5 affirmative vote of council. And council may extend the 45-day moratorium for an additional 10 months and 15 days, so that would then be a full year. But to do so would need to hold a public hearing on the matter. The proposed ordinance in front of you sets forth the findings that are required in order to pass the ordinance. It also would impose a 45-day moratorium, as I discussed. I want to point out that the ordinance does not apply to retailers that sell a broad range of products, including electronic cigarettes or electronic cigarette products. So it doesn't apply to a grocer or to a convenience store. It also does not apply to specialty tobacco shops. The ordinance would require the planning director to prepare a report for the council to consider regarding the actions taken in order by staff in order to look into the issue and come up with ways to remediate the public health, safety, and welfare danger that the council will have identified if it passes this ordinance. And that report will be before the council, if the council passes this ordinance, when the council meets again on December the 8th. That's all of my report. Are there any questions?
Any questions for staff?
I have one little minor thing. She's busy.
Of course.
It's just a report.
So, one little minor thing. Page 7. The bottom, the next to the last line. Adoption by the City Council by at least six affirmative votes. Obviously, that's a typo.
That is a typo. Thank you.
Okay.
That change, I'd like to make a motion to adopt interim ordinance number 603 as amended.
Second.
Are there any members of the public that would like to speak on this?
Yeah, I do have a question, though, for the attorney. So, yeah, I mean, I'm in favor of it, too, though on page 2, the third full paragraph, it talks about a lot of studying that needs to happen. And so I just want to get an idea of how much attorney time is going to go into this. I mean, we have South San Francisco as one of the cities that has one of these moratoriums already in place. So, you know, I mean, I would like to see us just have a full year on it eventually. Mm-hmm. You know, I've been by some of these vape shops on the peninsula. Yeah, I don't think they would be a good fit for Brisbane. But I also don't want to invest a lot of money in studying this stuff.
So a good part of the studying really, I think, falls to staff to see what's out there, and to bring to council what the options are to get some policy decisions about where to go. It would need to go to the Planning Commission, depending on what the council, what direction the council wants to go. In terms of attorney time, we would need to take a look to make sure that the options, what options are legal options, and which ones, if there are any legal issues with those. But I don't think it would take. It's not going to take much attorney time to come up with the options, because really at this point I think staff is going to be looking at that. The other attorney time, of course, is going to be involved in, you know, if you're going to initiate a planning commission process and have a process before the planning commission, to the extent you need any legal work there, it would take some legal work. So some of it depends on what it is, what kind of process you're engaging. There will need to be some attorney time involved in extending this 45-day moratorium. The government code allows you to do a 45-day moratorium, but you do need to have a public hearing on the extension to get you that full year. So there will be some attorney time involved there as well. But I think that the bulk of that work will really come from staff.
So we can keep the attorney time to a minimum.
It depends what you ask.
Well, yeah, but
yes.
We have the potential to keep it to a minimum.
Yes.
Okay. Then, all right, that's all the questions I have.
I'd just like to make one quick point, and that is that there are a lot of excellent findings in the ordinance. really point out the health dangers of e-cigarettes, and it's very strongly substantiated. So I think it's a justification for doing this, and I'm happy that we have that all in there, and thank the county for providing all the studies and so forth that support this activity and support this moratorium, and support the concern that we have for e-cigarettes as well as tobacco, because they are, most of them are carcinogenic, and it's even conceivable that some of them are even more carcinogenic than tobacco products. But since they're not properly regulated, we don't really even know for sure. But we do know that virtually all of them, or most of them anyway, or a high percentage of them have attributes and the aerosols and the emissions that are not good for your health, and certainly not good for kids' health.
And I want to echo Ray that I'm glad we're bringing up this issue, and I think we have an obligation to protect the youth in our community, and the fact that electronic cigarettes are proliferating in California, and that they contain nicotine and other carcinogens, I think is something that we need to be concerned about. And I agree with Cliff that I don't think that vape shops are something that we want to really see on the front of our town, or something that people come to our town for, especially if other cities are prohibiting them. Then we don't want to become like a haven for e-cigarettes. So I'm glad we're moving forward with this, and I hope that we can have something in place long term to protect our youth.
Call the question.
Well, I don't see where we are in imminent threat of being inundated with one or more vape shops. So I understand that we don't want perhaps a vape shop, and we don't have the population that would support a cigarette-only shop. We don't have, that kind of base in our community. And I think we're just trying to make more legislation that's urgent. We have I just don't see where we have that urgency, where we have to do an emergency or urgency moratorium on this. So doing it right, making the regulations for it, that's one thing. I just don't see where it's an emergency.
I think the emergency nature of it, I see as, being more of an interim strategy, kind of like temporary restraining order ahead of a preliminary injunction. It's something that we put in place like as a Band-Aid to protect ourselves against potential harm to our community. And then that allows us to take the time to really study it further.
Yes.
Okay. So there was the question called and a second.
Madam Mayor, I think, I don't know if you had public comment on this, but I don't believe we've taken it if you do have it.
I did ask.
Did you ask? I'm sorry.
I didn't see anyone that wanted to speak on it.
My apologies, Madam
But I'm sorry if I didn't make that clear. Is there anyone on the public that would like to speak on this issue? Seeing no takers, we have a motion and a second. So all those in favor?
Aye.
And again, I'll be the against, because I don't see the urgency. Okay. So that brings us to item B, Resolution 2015-47, a resolution of intention to initiate an amendment to the zoning ordinance of the City of Brisbane to amend the M2 zone as appropriate to ensure consistency in terminology between the zoning ordinance and the adopted 1994 general plan and to create distinct geographical districts as needed. And staff report, please.
I think it should be M1.
Yeah.
Yes, M1.
M1, okay.
Again, as was discussed earlier this evening, in conjunction with introducing Ordinance 599, the council directed staff to come back with this resolution of intention. Intent was to initiate a zoning code text amendment to bring the existing M1 zone into conformity with the general plan. There are kind of two components of that. One was terminology and wording in terms of reflecting the TC general plan designation. And so that would be one piece of it. And the second, as was discussed, the idea of whether or not the M1 zone is really applicable to the three sub-districts that are currently covered under the M1 zone, and whether they should be differentiated or different use regulations established. So that's something that would be addressed if the council does initiate this code amendment. And so we're recommending adoption of attached resolution 2015-47.
Questions for staff?
I don't.
No, seeing no questions. Member of the public who would like to speak? I have a slip from.
Like Ray, I think this ties together with earlier agenda item that you took. And first of all, I want to say a couple of things about this idea of jurisdiction that cities have. As I understand that the situation on a VWR could be looked at as a public nuisance. And of course, every city can enforce and abate a public nuisance. We know how to do that. That's what you could claim that says you could actually go out there and remove the toxins if you wanted to. It's not true that the city has no power. It's not true that they're wimps. They have power if they choose to use it. It's called the police power. Pretty broad. You can pass your own regulations if you choose to, because if you rely on the bought-off regulators who are captives of industry, nothing's going to get done that's right. You're just going to get weak solutions, like, let's leave all the toxins in place. Yeah, they're going to be safe that way. You know, it's stupid on the face of it. I mean, you know, this is the kind of stuff that these idiot consultants come up with. Now, going back to your other issue, we all know that in the general plan and zoning laws, the number one watchword is consistency. Things have to be consistency horizontally and vertically. Within the general plan, every element has to be consistent with every other element. But beyond that, before you can take an act, you also have to have your zoning consistent with your general plan. And what you've got here is you've admitted in public that you've got an inconsistency with your zoning and your general plan. Therefore, that last act you took is illegal. So you should reconsider it and rescind it. That way you're not forced to rescind it. It's totally illegal because you have an inconsistency between your zoning and your general plan, and that's right here on your agenda. It even uses the word inconsistency or consistency. You've admitted it. There's no way around it. You're stuck. So undo it. And take your time, by the way. There's no reason that we should be engaged in spot zoning for some guy who's not even a property owner. You know, that's also illegal. You know, showing favoritism like that to one person, that's not okay. I remember a property where anyway, so let's follow the lawyer. Let's do things right. Let's take our time, get our ducks in a row before you start making changes. Get the zoning consistent with the general plan. That way you're going to be legal. Otherwise, you're doing things illegally. It's that simple. Okay?
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak? Seeing no hands, would the city attorney, deputy city attorney, like to comment on the last speaker's comments?
There is a difference in the terminology used to label the zone. The general plan uses the TC terminology, and the zoning ordinance uses manufacturing. But the uses are identical. And so the consistency that is required is as to the uses. It doesn't apply as to the labels. That said, I think there's been quite a bit of discussion before the council at this meeting and others that has caused a level of confusion. And so at this point, I think staff is recommending that the terminology be changed so that confusion goes away. But there is not a legal inconsistency that exists with respect to the general plan's terminology and the zoning ordinance terminology.
Okay. Any further discussion?
No, I'm prepared to move ahead.
Okay. Is
Second.
that so? I take it you're making the motion and you're seconding that, and
That's Resolution 2015-47.
okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
You vote yes?
I did.
Oh.
I don't have a problem with doing proper zoning changes. It's not just that I'm planning on voting no on everything. But we'll see. So that brings us to staff report, city manager's report on upcoming activities.
Just a reminder that the council cities meeting is tomorrow evening here at the Doubletree here in Brisbane. And this item could actually be discussed under 10C, but when you get to that item, would ask you to consider coming in at 7 o'clock that evening to have your discussion about the reorganization, which would then take place on December 8th. Historically, as you recall, you have about a half-hour session, usually in the conference room. It's a noticed meeting and it's open to the public, but you go over your kind of succession in terms of council mayor and mayor pro tem.
What date again?
December. It would be December 3rd.
Okay.
At 7 o'clock.
Okay.
And it's a little presumptuous on my part. It presumes that you're going to approve the special meeting for December 3rd. So if you didn't do that, then we'd probably have to come up with another date.
Why is it special?
Well, we'll get to that when we get to that.
Oh, I mean, December 3rd is a normal meeting, right? Yeah.
Well, it would be, but you moved it to December 8th for the
last year so that Terry could officiate the whatchamacallit, right?
Actually, no, you officiated. That was a whole different reason.
It accomplished that, but the real reason was because we have to have so many days from the election to make sure
to certify the election.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So we wanted to. That's why you set December 8th for your regular council.
Right. Okay.
So that has kind of the weird effect of making December 3rd a special meeting, even though it's on a date that would normally be.
Okay, so we could have the December 3rd meeting. I need to check my calendar, so I don't know if I'm available that day. I'm sure I am. But we could do it at 6 o'clock, say in the conference room. It would be publicly noticed meeting.
I don't know that you need an hour and a half. I mean, I was going to suggest 7 o'clock.
Okay.
We're not gonna need that much time.
So.
Okay.
Can we move item C up to item A so that we can sort of continue this conversation?
I think we can just kind of skip A and B. I'm
okay.
Well,
if the rest of the council's okay with that.
Well, I'd like to make a couple of quick reports.
Yeah, and I want to briefly talk about this letter from
we'll be short.
Congress.
Okay, we'll move item C. So I think we need to extend the meeting. The motion to extend it to 11:20.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So The item C, to consider setting Thursday, December 3rd as the council meeting date for reintroduction of the smoking ordinance, is based on the thought, and I don't know what that thought is, that the subcommittee is ready to bring forward the smoking ordinance for our reconsideration on that date.
That is correct.
And that it needs to be a special ordinance because of its emergency nature.
No.
No.
No, no.
No, the reason
This is
it was being brought forward was the subcommittee did meet last week. You have a subcommittee member who will be leaving the council, and I think he has a desire for his part, but also the subcommittee's part, to be present when this comes before the city council. And so that was the idea, that we would bring it forward on the December 3rd date.
Okay,
And
this would be the sole item on the agenda.
That would be the sole item.
That's the idea.
Okay.
And assuming that you pass the first reading, then you could then, and do it before midnight, you could bring it back on December 8th for a second reading with the current council before you go into your reorganization, if that's the desire of the council.
Actually, the subcommittee's actually met twice, I think, since the last council meeting. So we've been working pretty hard on this, and the county representatives have been coming all the time, and members of the public. So it's been a pretty active response to the conversation that we had at the council level. And so we're doing our best to respond to that conversation. And so December 3rd would have been our normal meeting time anyway. Yes. And so really it's just using that time slot.
Oh, it would also give us 3 meetings back to back in a row.
What do you mean?
It would be the only item on the agenda that evening.
It's still a meeting, yes. I understand the desire for the subcommittee to see this to an end, and I think that, I don't mind having the December 3rd meeting, then we'll have the meeting the following week, and then the following week after that. But I do think that it is being a bit presumptuous to try to read it, have the second reading before we reorganize. I think that's not giving due to the council that's going to be coming forward.
I think it's, Terry, I think this is important to Ray, and he's leaving the council, and I think that it's his wish that we're able to get it done, and I certainly would like to try and honor that. Not sure what's in it.
I'm not sure what's in it either. I have no idea what's
That's how we're going to find out.
And that'll all come out at the first meeting. So the idea is that we'll have that December 3rd meeting, and we'll have all the discussion, and that by the time it gets to the second reading, everything will have been worked out, and it'll go through the motions as all ordinances do.
But that would only give the public a couple of days to.
It's 5
between before second reading, and I think
according to the legal counsel that 5 days is what's required. So it's within.
It's legal, but the request is only now just to have the meeting on the 3rd, and we're not talking about necessarily establishing the 8th as the next move on this. That can be determined on the 3rd, I think. So all we're asking for now is to have this meeting on the 3rd.
I agree with that.
I'm okay with that, but Madam Mayor, you're the one that sets the agenda. So it's one item, and well, actually it'd be 2 items: pre-meeting at 7 p.m. and then.
Well, since we are thinking about setting a meeting and we do have our council person elect, do you have any are you having availability? Because we're talking about setting a meeting. I'm going to invite Madison Davis up.
Well, I can certainly make myself available, but, you know, if for some reason you don't vote on the 3rd, or, you know, this needs to come back to the council after the 8th or on the 8th, I've been following this very closely, very passionate about this issue, so I feel prepared to be able to participate in the discussions, and I feel informed on this issue. But of course, you know, I know that this is very near and dear to Ray's heart, and I would never want to overstep those boundaries. So if, you know, this is something that can come before you in that time frame, then I think that that's what should happen. But just know that I'm prepared, you know, to discuss this with you when I'm sworn in. So.
And my first concern was whether you would be available on that date for the pre-meeting, which was the discussion about the council reorganization.
On the 3rd?
Yes.
I will make it happen. Is that all you need from me?
7
Yes.
p.m.
Yes.
Sure. You got
Put it in your calendar.
I got it.
Okay, so I guess we are setting the special meeting for Thursday, December 3rd.
Okay, and now the 8th, let me ask you, the 10th is Planning Commission meeting, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right, and that's why we're looking at the 8th, huh?
That is correct.
Okay. And are we going to have a meeting on the 17th?
We're currently scheduled to.
I have actually, as one little announcement, been hearing from the public about our late meeting dates and our late meeting hours, and wanting to know if we can change the council meetings to having them 3 or 4 times a week or a month, because we can't seem to get the work done.
Well, we get it done. It's just in the late hour.
Well, but that's not getting it done, and I agree with the way the public has been responding to this, and you know, and I know that would be an issue with planning and with other conflicts in the schedule, and probably conflicts on our schedules, because there's other meetings that also meet. But
let's have that discussion about that next year after we do the reorganization and see where we land.
I just wanted to bring it up that it had come to my attention. I wasn't saying that we should discuss it tonight at all. I'm just trying to let people know, because it has been brought up to me by several people. And I know it's probably been brought up to all of you also about the late hours. So, yes, Madison.
I'm sure there's a good reason for this, but on Park and Rec, we start at 6:30, and I know you guys oftentimes have special meetings before the council meetings, but is there a reason why we start at 7:30? And, you know, maybe if we started at 6:30, then it would push everything an hour earlier. Is that ever a possibility? I'm just trying to think of a way that maybe we could bring the meeting time, it's still taking the same amount of time to operate the meeting, but just having it end earlier because we're starting earlier. So I'm sure there's a good reason, but I'd love to hear it. So
thank you, Madison.
Some of it has to do with tradition, and some of it has to do with scheduling, and that again is something that could be an option going forward in the future, depending on what the council wants to do. So, anyone else? Ray, you wanted to make some comments or some of your subcommittee reports?
A couple of things.
Did we agree on the 8th? I'm sorry.
What's that?
We agreed on meeting.
I think we agreed on the 8th. I don't think we had to vote on it.
Agreed on the 3rd.
I mean, on the 3rd.
3rd.
How about the 8th?
You agreed to that some time ago.
Yeah,
okay.
That's been on the calendar for a long while.
For quite some time.
Right.
We didn't agree to an agenda on the 8th. just that we're having a meeting.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like a reorganization meeting.
Yeah, right. And the installation of the
Shoot, that was
new council member.
That was 3 weeks ago. Come on, man. We got to give me a break here. That's ancient history. Sorry, Ray.
That's okay. No. Yeah. I just had a couple of things to point out. One is I noticed on the Greenbelt Alliance newsletter today that ABAG has increased the grant funding for priority conservation areas from $10 to $16 million, and they've reduced the matching from 3 to 1 to 2 to 1, which I thought might be of interest, and I know Paul Pascal is going to be interested in that, so I thought I'd announce that. I also wanted to point out that I attended the Sustainable San Mateo County Indicators Summit, and the issue was water. And they had some very interesting information on bioremediation, which I'm going to share with the planning director. Some companies that do that, I think that's something we should look at, especially for the Baylands. And I want to announce that there was a raffle held at this meeting, and the raffle was for a rain barrel. And the person who won the raffle was the city manager of Brisbane, sitting right over there. So he came home with a rain barrel.
Good thing he drives a truck.
Exactly, that's what he said. This is one of the few people there who actually could transport it home.
My wife was slightly underwhelmed.
Sure.
She was expecting a Caribbean.
Anyway, we were all impressed.
It's going to be located in the front yard.
Maybe we can get a gold award for that for sustainability next year.
I think we should put it in a city hall.
Yeah. And I'd also like to point out that the Baylands Subcommittee has met with a potential consultant for helping us with the ecological economics quantitative analysis from a pretty interesting, competent firm in San Francisco. And so we're hoping to get a proposal, and we'll see where that goes. But it was a good discussion.
Yeah, it was a great discussion.
Yeah. Her name is Lisa Wise. Okay. And then finally, I'll just mention this and let Laurie take it from there, that because she mentioned it earlier, that the two of us as a liaison met with the Open Space and Ecology for their work plan discussion. And I thought that went rather well. Laurie can talk about everything else, but the one thing I did want to indicate is that I suggested an item that was not on their work plan, even though the council had instructed them to be involved in the past, and that was for them to pay attention to the environmental, ecological dimensions of the Baylands process. And especially when you note that the number one interest of the community was open space. And certainly they should keep involved in that to make sure that the way it evolves is something that is consistent with the community wishes. And so they were quite responsive, positively responsive to that. And then there were a number of other things. Maybe Laurie can take it from there.
Sure. So one of the things we talked about was, of course, the Brisbane Acres and their desire to make sure that that future councils don't, revert to selling the property that we've worked so hard to preserve, as we talked about tonight. And then one of the issues that they raised questions was, how do we, continue to educate the public about what we do? And they wanted a sense from us of how effective their table was at the Day in the Park, and if there were any other ways that they could do their outreach about their educational materials that they produce. And I had suggested that they take advantage of other events, like we had the pop-up for Parkside, and we'll hopefully be having some events for the new library planning, and so that they not just have events that where they're the center of the topic of discussion, but they go to other community events and kind of take their materials to them in a pop-up sort of way. So I thought that they received that suggestion well. That's the gist of it. And as for my subcommittee reports, I guess the other thing that I've done is I met with staff and the county representatives working on community choice energy, Peninsula Clean Energy is what it's called. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on, that we're going to be setting in a workshop to learn about the program and how Brisbane can participate. And also we talked with them about the Baylands project, because they've expressed some interest in the site as being a place where they could potentially put some on-site solar panels to use for their county-wide program. So we gave them some background on the site and learned a little bit more about how their on-site renewable programs work in Marin and Sonoma. And Supervisor Pine was at that meeting as well. He came down.
Clark,
I don't have anything to say. Motion to extend the meeting to 11:30.
Second.
all in favor? Aye. So briefly, I attended the CCAG meeting last Thursday. They're doing a study that's going to be looking at sea level rise and their readiness to cope with sea level rise. They're going to be doing a study on 30 assets, varying from freeways, infrastructure, sewage plants, toxic landfills. And once they identify those areas, then they're going to extrapolate the sea level change hazards and then multiply that out on all the different sites and what the hazards are going to be. I think that's going to be a very interesting study, and I look forward to seeing the results. I was also appointed to a CCAG board they're calling the Water Board. They don't quite know what it's all going to entail, but there's a variety of sea level rise and stormwater and those kind of issues that are going to be discussed. And so I was happy to volunteer for that. That will be meeting monthly, starting, I believe, in the early spring. Attended the BBCAG meeting. That was very interesting. And actually had some very interesting information about not only the VWR site, but the information about the Kinder Morgan tank farm also, and their cleaning up of the previous spills. So,
do you know if that meeting was televised or recorded in any way?
No.
Okay.
The BBCAG?
Okay.
No.
Yeah, I was hoping to attend, but it was ill that evening.
Yeah.
The request was made, but there was, for some reason or other, no one implemented it.
All right. So this morning I was at a commute.org meeting with Maria. Main item of interest was a presentation by a company called Scoop, who they have this app that helps connect potential carpoolers, but allowing the flexibility of people's schedules to occur. So you don't have to just have these set times. So you meet here at 8 o'clock in the morning, and you meet here at 5 o'clock at night.
Like a van pool.
Yeah, with this app, you can change your schedule, move it around, and connect with other carpoolers. So it's kind of an interesting thing.
They're doing that in Palo Alto.
Uber share.
Kind of like that, yes.
Yeah. Palo Alto's doing that already. I heard from the sustainability director for Palo Alto at the Green Festival, and he was talking about the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so the Scoop company is picking up tons of members. And then, so all of you have this letter from Congresswomen Eshoo, Farr, and Spear. And so the efforts of the Congress members taking all of our feedback, working with the FAA in Washington, D.C. to have constructive engagement with the communities that have been affected by the new RNAV procedures has bared some fruit. And so there was a letter that I wrote as the chair of the roundtable, and it was in your packet the last meeting. Part of that letter also included a simulation of stick procedures and candle procedures, which come out of Oakland. Stick comes out of SFO, along with a description of how many flights are flown properly. And so there's a body of information that went with this flight procedure. So tomorrow morning I have a conference call with Congresswoman Spear, and we'll be talking about, how do we take these flight procedures and come up with ways to alleviate noise while also ensuring that the FAA, that these tweaks, these changes, are also safe and efficient with their protocol for these new RNAV procedures. So there is some major potential with this. This is unprecedented from the FAA. Having this kind of constructive dialogue. Usually they've just been very
willing to talk.
No, yeah, I mean they're a huge bureaucracy, and they do not engage the public in a constructive way.
Right.
And here they are. But again, I'm moving into this very cautiously, but there are some potentials, and so so I have this conference call tomorrow morning at 8. Hopefully we get out of here soon, so I can be awake for it. But I will let you know how that goes at our next meeting, and but yeah, some potential positive news could be on the horizon.
Good job on that, Cliff. Appreciate the hard work you've been bulldogging with that.
Thank you.
We've gotten a lot of headway with your leadership on this whole thing, and being the chair of the roundtable. So, thank you.
Thank you, Claire.
And good luck on that call.
Yes.
Any other reports? So that would bring us to oral communications number 2.
The date for the Community Choice Energy Workshop.
Right. And I did forget to mention, with respect to the CCE, that on Tuesday the Board of Supervisors unanimously voted to establish the JPA for the CCE with the county as the first charter member. So the next step will be having the city sign up, which is what this is.
Could we decide at one of the meetings in December on when to have it in January?
Well, I think, can we decide that later, you're asking?
Yeah.
And there's a deadline of the end of February to be able to join in on the first round of cities.
I think we're trying to, it says,
we're looking at
set a date for a workshop in January.
Right.
Yeah, so I mean, setting a date, if we set it at the next meeting, we kind of have some proposed meetings maybe, instead of trying to set it now.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think the county should propose some dates, and we take a look at them.
Would it have to be a Monday or a Tuesday?
For the county?
For the CCA?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So if there's a preference that the council has, otherwise we'll work with the county staff and get a date and maybe bring it back to your.
If I had a preference, okay, I would say Tuesday.
Tuesday? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, we'll try to aim for a Tuesday then.
Yeah.
Okay with that, Lori?
Sure, not the first week, because
Not the first
some
week.
of us won't be back yet from holiday.
Tuesday?
Tuesday, yes.
Madison?
Until it gets to be summer, Tuesdays are okay.
Beer can races.
I might have a childcare issue on the 12th, but if that's the date that works, then.
I thought we were going to wait and try to figure out the
Okay.
date.
Yeah, I know, you just.
Schedule that far out?
We'll bring a couple dates for you
Okay.
at the next meeting.
Okay, so that brings us to oral communications number 2. Are there any members of the public who'd like to speak on an item that we didn't discuss tonight? Nope, seeing no hands. Motion to adjourn?
So move.
Motion to extend the meeting 1 minute? No. Okay, so move. Second.
All right.
All in favor?
You bet.
Aye.